My name is Simone Reyes, and I'm an animal rights activist.
I've been in the movement for over 20 years. And during that time, I have worn many different activist hats. So sometimes I've been the quiet, methodical, respectful, gentle persuasion kind of an activist. And other times I've been the naked girl in front of the media, loud, balls against the wall, take no prisoners, you don't want to be alone in an elevator with me wearing a fur coat kind of an activist. Personally, I feel that there's a time and a place for all kinds of activism, as long as it's coming from a place of truth. Now, I'm not sure what brought you here today. Maybe you're vegan. Maybe you are vegetarian, pescatarian, raw foodist. Maybe you are a meat eater who's veg curious. I don't care how you got here. I only care about how you leave. I want you to leave vegan, and I want you at least to consider joining what I call the vegan mafia, the animal rights movement. Now, I'd like to share with you a quote by one of my favorite activists, Captain Paul Watson from the Sea Shepherd. If you want to know where you would have stood on slavery before the Civil War, don't look to where you stand on slavery today. Look to where you stand on animal rights. Now, really digest that, because to me, that embodies everything that the animal rights movement is about. I should give you some warning, though. If you do decide to join us, you will get pushback. And not just from strangers, but from people close to you. Your parents, your brothers, your sisters, your coworkers, your doctors, your lovers. Everybody will have an opinion. And the one word that's going to come up a heck of a lot is crazy. People are going to think that you are crazy for demanding that animals have the same fundamental rights as humans. But it's okay, because I have an answer to that. 148 years ago, slavery was still legal. It was normal to buy and sell people. And everybody who thought that one day slavery just might be abolished, they were called crazy. Certainly, that long ago and many years afterward, it was legal to beat your dog to death. And everyone who thought that maybe there should be a law against that, they were called crazy. 93 years ago, women did not have the right to vote. Everybody who thought, well, one day maybe they just might, well, they were called, you got it, crazy. And only 10 years ago, in some states, it was still, you have to remember, homosexual acts, okay, between two consenting adults in the privacy of their own home was still a criminal offense. Do I even need to say the word? Okay? So what have we learned from history? Hasn't history shown us that the crazy ones are really the visionaries? The prophets, the geniuses? It's kind of like my friend Ari Solomon likes to say, we are not crazy, we are just from the future. And what a future it is going to be. Because people are going to look back at the way that we are legally around animals, the way that we are allowed to enslave them and torture them and use them and abuse them, and they will be shocked, and they will be horrified, and they will be ashamed. As well they should be, because the way that we are legally allowed to use and abuse animals is indefensible, and it is unbloody forgivable. Now, I came into the movement like everybody else, pretty much, right? I ate meat, and I loved pizza, and I wore wool caps and leather jackets, and I believed that I loved animals. I mean, when I was 10 years old, I got my first job at the cat practice veterinarian's office on West 13th Street. When I was in the 7th grade, my friends Elizabeth and Sato and I started the I Love Animals Club, but I was completely and totally unconscious. It wasn't until I was in college and I turned on a documentary on the Canadian seal slaughter, which is still going on today. Brigitte Bardot, I remember, was there, and I remember seeing these gorgeous, white, fluffy baby seals playing with their mothers on the ice, and Then all of a sudden these men came out, and they had these big clubs with them, and they had these bats and these hooks, and they started beating them to death one by one. Then Brigitte Bardot started talking. She'd been there a couple of days before. She had pleaded her case. She tried to save them, as many people still do. And she had her arms wrapped around one of the baby seals, and they were subtitling what she was whispering to them in French. And she said, "Don't worry, we'll get them." Now, I didn't know who we was. I just knew that whatever army that was, I wanted to be a part of it. I wanted to be one of those people. So this was a long time ago, okay? Like 20 years ago, the internet wasn't that available. So I called up the only animal rights group that I'd ever heard of, PETA, and I said, "Hi, I'm in New York City and I want to save the seals." They were like, "Okay." They gave me an address of a local group called Activist for Animals. They were small, grassroots, pretty militant group. They sent me over there. It was a Saturday. It was cold. I showed up there, and they put me in this fur coat that had been doctored up and donated. And it had like all this fake blood on it, and it had these slogans sewn into it that said like "fur shame" and "fur is dead," and it took 150 animals to make this coat. And they put it on me, and a couple other people had some too. We had our posters, and we had our flyers, and our pamphlets. And they said, "Okay, let's go." And I said, "All right, where are we going to go?" And they said, "We're going to walk around Manhattan, and we're going to yell at every single fur wearer that we see." I was like, "Okay." So we walked along with our signs, and every fur wearer that wouldn't take a pamphlet on the information, we yelled, "Shame, shame, 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 shame" at them until they walked away, or ran away, actually. And then I remember one of the activists came up to me and he said, "Hey, are your shoes leather?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Oh, wow, I stopped wearing leather years ago." He said, "But don't worry, I'll give you some advice, where you can buy some synthetic shoes." And I was like, "Okay." Then, we walked a little farther, and another activist said, "Hey, how long have you been vegan?" And I'm like, "What the heck is vegan?" I was like, "I'm here to save the seals. I'm new. I don't know." And she was like, "Oh, don't worry, we'll hook you up." I'm like, "Okay, thanks." So I'm walking home that day, and I was like, "Man, I feel like I just failed my first protest." But they didn't make me feel this way. They became my friends and my teachers and my mentors. They basically took me on a tour of the world that I'd already been living in, except they took me through the back door. Right? They turned on a light because I'd been living in the dark. They woke me up because I had been asleep. They made me conscious because I had been unconscious. And they didn't make me feel bad about being unconscious because they were unconscious once, right? So the first thing that they told me about was a very big issue at the time. It was the steel jaw leg hole traps. It is what it looks like, a trap left out in the wilderness where animals would fall into it, and not just fur-bearing animals, dogs, cats, eagles, didn't matter. They would get caught in the trap, and then the furriers and their workers would come, and they would beat the animals to death, or they would drown them. But more likely, they would come and they would find just one limb, because the animals would self-amputate themselves because they had babies to get back to. Then, of course, they told me and showed me the inside of a factory farm. Thousands upon thousands upon thousands of animals trapped into little tiny wire cages and gestation crates and boxes and stalls, cramped so far together that they would be mutilating each other, chewing each other's tails, and pecking each other. It was the worst thing I had ever seen. They made me understand that these animals were bred to be so big and drugged to be so big that they couldn't even stand up or walk a couple of inches because of their weight. I saw animals dying 2 or 3 inches from water. And then, of course, they told me how they answered the mutilating problem. They would just take a hot, iron, burning hot, and they would just slice off their horns and slice off their beaks and slice off their toes and slice off their tails without any anesthesia whatsoever. And then they told me about the transportation trucks. They told me about how animals are, gathered 6,000 birds in an hour, thrown into boxes, thrown into trucks, pigs being electrically prodded if they're not moving fast enough, and then if they just pick them up and throw them in the trucks, and the transportation process is so awful because there's days and days without food or water where the animals are being knocked around inside the trucks. They're being exposed to every kind of heat, the freezing cold, and many of them die on the way. The ones that don't, well, they get to go to the slaughterhouse, right? They get to go through what's called the slaughter process. I call it a process because that's what it is. You know, the conveyor belts move very quickly, so there's no way to guarantee exactly what process is going to render the animal dead, right? So you see animals that are hung upside down, you know, pigs, cows, chickens, doesn't matter, by one leg. Usually that leg is broken, if you remember, because their weight is so strong over their bodies. And their hips popping out, being dislocated just by the jolt of being put upside down. Then you see their throats being at least partially slit. You see their entire bodies being dunked into scalding hot water, still alive, you know, so that they can loosen up the feathers and make the skin soft, so that when they go into the defeathering tanks, often still alive, it'll be easier. And then at the end of all of it, if they're still alive, which chances they are, then they get hacked up alive, one by one. I have seen animals wide-eyed in terror being hacked up alive. I've heard them screaming and squealing and seizing in pain. And for what? So that we can pollute our bodies, destroy the earth, have a snack. Then the activist told me that different issues often call for different measures. They explained that when it came to telling people about meat or wool or the circus, they used a gentler approach because people just didn't know. They said, but you know what, when it comes to fur, and this was years ago, they said when it comes to fur, they said our gloves are off. They said because at this point people know about the steel jaw leg hold traps, they know that animals are being drowned, they know that they're being beaten, they know that it takes anywhere from 60 to 300 animals to make one fur coat. They know that they're being vaginally and anally electrocuted, and they don't care. Why? They want to show off. They're selfish. So yeah, we give them a selfish reason not to. Maybe when they leave their house, they're going to think twice about it because maybe they're going to be harassed or embarrassed or made to feel like they're wearing 300 animals on their back. So what? So I started to understand that it's up to the activist to decide what kind of tactics you want to use. And you have to always remember, it always has to do with what's going to make the best effect for the animals. That has to be the bottom line, and that's a choice that all of us can make. You know, you can be the quiet, methodical activist, or you can be the naked girl on a street corner yelling at everybody. I'm fine with all of it. Just make sure you always have the animals first and foremost in your mind. Now, obviously, after watching these videotapes and going to protests and everything, it took like a minute and I became vegan. How could I not, right? And everybody here probably knows what vegan is, but if you don't, obviously we don't eat meat, fish, dairy, eggs, white sugar, honey. We don't wear animals, right? So we don't wear fur, leather, or suede, or wool, or down, or silk. And we certainly don't believe in animals for entertainment. So you're not going to find us at a zoo or an aquarium or a circus or on a carriage horse ride or at a rodeo or horse racing, none of it. Because let's face it, if you're using an animal, chances are you're abusing an animal. We don't believe in any medical research with animals, any animal testing, none of it. Now at the time, and still, I was working for Russell Simmons. He was very, very busy changing the face of popular music, and he was becoming the godfather of hip-hop. He was also eating a heck of a lot of White Castle hamburgers at the time, if I remember correctly. He has gone on, of course, to becoming one of the most recognizable faces of the vegan animal rights movement, and he has also said a quote that I love. He says it almost in every interview that he does. I want to read it so I don't get it wrong. I believe the greatest karmic disaster in the history of humankind are the 30 billion farm animals made to be born into suffering each year. Now, the reason why I like to talk about Russell, other than that I'm proud of him and I'm proud to still work for him, is because Russell helps, just by the guy that he helps debunk the myth of what animal rights activists are. A lot of people still think that we're just animal lovers to the extreme, or animal fanatics, or we can't relate to people, and so that's why we deal mostly with animals. Okay, but look at Russell. Now, I bring my companion animal, Hubble Yoda, to the office with me every single day. He travels with Russell. He's with Russell almost 24 hours a day. How many times has Russell Simmons, PETA's Person of the Year, reached down to pet Hubble Yoda? 0 times. How many times have I seen him in the history of our lives together, which is a really, really long time? How many times have I seen him reach down to pet any animal unless he is forced to when he's doing a PSA? None times. And that is because he understands that animal rights is a social justice issue. Let me say that again, it's very important. This is not a bunch of fanatics. Animal rights is a social justice issue. We want a world that is doing the right thing, that's about justice, about doing what's right and what's fair. Oppression is oppression, no matter what it's put onto. So that's just something that I love about him, is the fact that he doesn't want to pet animals all the time. I think it speaks volumes. Now, more full disclosure, if you decide to join us, you should know we have enemies, and as much as I hate to admit it, they're big. And they're powerful. They have friends in high places. Remember, the government subsidizes the meat industry. So what do? What's their biggest weapon? Their biggest weapon is propaganda and false advertising. They're very good at it. We all grew up on it, right? Our Happy Meals, our laughing cows, the dancing bacon strips, the big, strong people that have their milk mustaches. We've all learned that these are all a lie, okay? This is a fantasy world created to keep their business going. So how do we connect people to animals so that they don't believe this myth that's being fed to them all the time? Well, I think the best way is to reconnect people to animals. You know, when we're little, it's natural for us. You know, that's the thing that makes a 3-year-old smile more than anything, is seeing an animal. But people become disconnected, and that is because of this false advertising. So I think the best way is to just reconnect people to animals by giving them examples of how animals are more like us than not like us. I mean, personally, I think that animals are ethically superior to us, given most choices that they make, but that's another thing. I will say that animals, when they are given the opportunity, amaze us. For example, there was an experiment where there were primates in a lab. They were facing, primate group number 1 was facing primate group number 2. Primate group number 1 were giving levers to push. Every time they pushed the lever, they got some food. Here's the rub. Every time they pushed the lever, they watched another primate get an electric shock. How many times do you think that they wanted to hit that lever once they learned what it meant? Some went hungry for 14 days. Do you think that most people would go hungry for 14 days? Well, don't worry. They did a similar experiment. You know what people were doing? I'm hungry. Excuse me. Oh, sorry about that. I'm hungry. So another example to give them are dolphins. Right? How many times have we heard about dolphins who are saving divers and swimmers? And by the way, not just adults, they save children, and they've even saved dogs from drowning. Now, this picture I saw on the internet, and it kind of intrigued me, and I think it's a good example to use. I was like, what is going on there? Well, in China, they had this experiment where people were supposed to see who could hold their breath the longest in a very cold pool of water surrounded by beluga whales. It's kind of random, but okay. So they had the experiment, and what happens when you hold your breath for too long? Well, your body starts to do really weird things, right? Well, this diver, her legs stopped working. She couldn't move. The whales, they felt her distress. They surrounded her. One of them grabbed her leg and pushed her out of the water, saving her life. Now, I would be here all day if I talked about hero dogs and cats. I mean, what are they? They're the first alert for house fires and gas leaks. They're usually, dogs are the ones that, stop kidnappers, and they attack rapists and home invasions and everything. So remind people of that when you want to reconnect them. And then fish. How many times have I heard about fish? Fish don't have feelings. Well, it depends. First of all, what do you mean by feelings? Do you mean like they don't actually have the capacity to feel pain? Because we know that, right? Scientists figured that out a long, long time ago. But are you talking about emotions? Well, let's see. They have a language. We just don't speak it, but they speak it to each other. And what about the fact that they care for each other and they have family relationships? Here's one example. There was a fish tank. Fish number 1 was healthy. He was certainly depressed because he was in a fish tank, okay? But fish number 1 is healthy. Fish number 2 was handicapped. He couldn't really make it any higher than the bottom of the tank. So what happened every day when the guardian would come and sprinkle the flakes on top of the water? Fish number 1 would go under fish number 2, lifting him up every single day to make sure he didn't miss a meal. So that's what people can think about when they say, oh, fish don't have feelings. Bats? Oh, bats are so spooky. Nobody wants to hang out with a bat, right? Well, actually, bats are so compassionate. Bats, if another bat is having a long childbirth, or if they're injured or ailing, they run around town or they fly around town, and they gather all the food and they bring it back to their ailing friends or family members. Then talk to people, try to reconnect them to animals by talking about grief. Animals grieve basically exactly as we do, just as strongly. Horses have been known to stand vigil around deceased loved ones. They become listless. They want to be alone. Doesn't that sound familiar? Elephants. Elephants have been known to gather the bones of deceased loved ones, and they cry real tears. And we've seen those tears at circuses. This dolphin broke many, many hearts online and on national news. She became so despondent, so upset, she couldn't come to terms with the fact that her baby had been killed. She kept lifting him up to the water's surface over and over again, trying to revive him in vain. Many of us saw online the stray dogs, right, on the highway. It went viral. Everybody saw it. One of the dogs had been hit by a car fatally. The other dog ran out into traffic in the middle of a highway, pulled that dog off to the side of the road. This dog here is Maggie. She was in Southern California, and she was standing guard over a deceased loved one. Now, I'm telling you all these stories, but chances are you've seen it. If you have a companion animal at home and you lost one of them, what are they doing? They're hanging by the door waiting, right? They stop eating. They want to hide more. We know they feel it. They grieve. Happened to me. I adopted Cassidy and Pikachu from the same shelter. And when I had to say goodbye and let go of Pikachu at the Animal Medical Center, I brought her body home so that my dogs, Cassidy and Stevie, and my cats would be able to see her, understand what happened, and say goodbye. Cassidy collapsed over her body. And finally, they have a lot of the same romantic issues as we do. I mean, the divorce rate in America is what, around 50%? Well, animals in the wild, many of them, as we know, they are mating for life. But vultures are kind of funny. If vultures catch their mate philandering, they attack their mate and the mistress. So they could end up on Jerry Springer just as easily as the rest of us. So now that you've reconnected people to animals and they start to feel empathy for animals, which is great because it's very hard to eat and wear and use animals when you have empathy for them. Then you're going to get the 1-2 punch, and people are going to start to get nervous. They might have to start, changing their wardrobe, or they might have to start changing the way that they eat. So they're going to say things like, yeah, but the Bible said that I'm supposed to be eating meat. I mean, they said it's okay. Well, actually, the Bible said thou shalt not kill. So how does that factor in exactly? It's sort of, hunting, fishing. And just so you know, you can tell them this, there is no religion that mandates the eating of meat. Then, of course, what they're going to do is they're going to feel kind of bad, they're going to feel kind of guilty, so they're going to agree with you, but not at all. They're going to get very puffed up when they talk about this. They're going to say, look, you're absolutely right. I would never, ever eat an animal from a factory farm. That's why I get my animal meat and dairy from organic farms and humane certified farms and free roaming and free range and cageless. Here's your answer for that. I am paraphrasing, but I think that Ingrid Newkirk from PETA had a really good way of explaining this. If a dog is going to be kicked 7 times, and then someone comes up with a way that they're only going to be kicked 6 times a day, is that better? Well, I mean, is it better? Is it 7 times, 6 times? I mean, I guess technically you could say it's minimally better, but let's stop kicking the dog. That is what these farms are. Do not fall to that. Again, false advertising. Sure, they might have a little bit of extra room. Maybe a hen gets a box to nest in. Maybe they get some outdoor space. But if you do your research, you will see that this outdoor space is not exactly paradise, because you can still cram a whole lot of animals into a space without cages. And if there is an outdoor space, it could be a hole in the wall, which, as we talked about, the animals usually can't get over to anyway because they're bred so big. But let's say that they can find the hole in the wall and they get their little outdoor space. That can be just another mud lot filled with feces, overcrowded. And then typically these animals are going through all the same mutilations with the hot blade, right, on their beaks and on their tails. They're typically still going in the same transportation vehicles in every extreme weather that we talked about, and they're surely ending up at the same slaughterhouses going through that same slaughter process. So do not fall victim to thinking that there is any such thing as humane meat. There is not. Then they're going to get a little bit like annoyed, and they're just going to flip it on you. And they're going to say, look, I just care about you. Okay, I just cannot imagine where in the world you're getting your protein from. Well, you can let them know that the average meat eater has 2 to 6 times more protein than is nutritionally recommended. And what does that mean? That means that they're getting the high cholesterol, the saturated fat problems, the heart disease, all of that. So thank you so much for your concern, but we're all good there. And then you got them up against a wall, and then they're just pissed off. Right? Then they're just like, this freaking vegan has an answer for everything. So what you're going to want to say is, well, what they're going to say, first of all, they're going to say, it's evolution. You know, cavemen, our bodies were made to eat meat, right? That's what we were made to do from the beginning of time. It's the food chain. Well, first of all, how in the world is a factory farm even part of any food chain? That's number one. But you know, listen, you're going to have to play along, be like, okay, then let's talk about it. So if you were really a carnivore, right, then when you're driving down the road, listening to your tunes, right, and you see some roadkill, your first thought should be, hold on. I'm pulling this car over because that looks so good. I'm just going to throw my face in there and just try to scrape some of that off the ground. Because you know what? A carnivore, like a coyote, he's all about that. And if you really still, you know, you can't really get your argument across, then tell them to go down to the Bowery. There's some free food down there. There are rats running rampant, okay? Now, I only suggest this. I love rats. I only suggest this because I know that person is not going to be able to catch a rat with what nature gave them, okay? And if they did, by some miracle, maybe they enlisted the help of their cat, maybe then they'd catch a rat because the cat is a carnivore. But let's assume that somehow they've caught this rat, right, and they're trying to rip it apart. Not doing as good a job, of course, but let's say they're trying to rip it apart. They should be really into eating their little noses and their little whiskers and their rubbery tails. Like, that should get them really excited, right? They should be like, yes, this is what I wanted for lunch, exactly. And then they should actually look at the fact on why it's harder for them to do this or near impossible. Because first of all, we have hands and we have fingernails, right? Carnivores, omnivores, they have very strong paws and they have very sharp claws. Ask your manicurist how strong our nails are. Not very. And our hands are very good for picking fruits and vegetables. So we don't have the claws. Then talk about our teeth, right? Our teeth are short. Our molars are flat, very good for grinding plant food. All right, yes, we have canines, but look at our canines next to the canine of a carnivore. Much different. Like, put your teeth up against a lion, honestly, okay? Of course, we need our canines to bite into an apple or broccoli or celery or things like that. But we are nothing like carnivores in what we are made up of. Even look at our intestinal tracts. Our intestinal tracts are long, right? Our intestinal tracts are very good for absorbing and digesting and breaking down fruits and vegetables and fiber. Look at the intestinal tract of a carnivore. Very short. Why is that? What happens when you have raw meat hanging around? It spoils, right? It rots. They have to push this through their system very quickly, which as carnivores, they're able to do. And guess what? They don't get any of the diseases that humans get because our bodies are herbivores. They are made for fruits, plants, vegetables. That is what we are supposed to be eating. So now that you've answered every single one of your questions, they start to get mad. So what they do is they go to the law and they try to get bills passed. They're only meant to do one thing: shut us down and shut us up. And they're doing it. They've gotten a lot of press recently, right? They're called ag-gag laws. You've probably heard of them. The point is that they make it illegal for undercover investigators to film in factory farms. Now, hold on. Like, why is that a problem? Because remember, you're producing these happy meals, and you've got these laughing cows, and everybody is so happy on the farm. What are you afraid we're going to find? What are you afraid we're going to find? Well, we know, because Mercy for Animals and PETA and Farm Sanctuary, they've already shown us, haven't they? I didn't bring a video here today because most people like vomit or they pass out, and like there's a lot of speakers, and I didn't want to take up the time of having to call EMS. But please go on those sites, go to those organizations and look for yourselves. But basically, we know what they would find. We would find this. We would find animals being kicked, beaten, heads bashed against the wall, and raped on factory farms. Not to mention all of the standard practices that are legal and going on every day, right? The slaughterhouses, the mutilations, the castrations without painkillers. That's what they don't want you to see. And so how do we win this war now that we've pretty much come up with an argument for every single opposition that we get? How do we grow our numbers? Now listen, don't get me wrong. Activists are doing a great job. Veganism is up. Vegan restaurants are popping up in every single city. We're doing our job. But to me, do I think we're doing it fast enough? No. We need to be the next freaking Occupy Wall Street. They shut down Wall Street for a time, didn't they? And that was without any media help. The media did not even give the numbers of who were showing up every day because, again, it was run by big business. We need to be the people in the media every single day talking about animals. We need to take our gloves off. We need to be surrounding factory farms, surrounding medical laboratories, and shutting them down. And the only way to do this is to keep going and growing our numbers. So how do we grow our numbers? Well, I think we go to the groups that already are activists, right? So they're halfway there, right? Their compassion is there. The window is open. We just have to blow ourselves inside of it. I think we start with the women. I think we start with the feminists. First of all, women and animals are called a lot of the same names, right? Cows, bitches, sows, beavers. The names go on and on. In a patriarchal society, what are women and what are animals? Well, we are bought, we are sold, we are undervalued. And talk to women and feminists about dairy farms. As we know, dairy cows make enough milk to feed their baby. They don't get to feed their baby, but that's as much milk as they make. So how are they constantly making this milk? Well, they're being painfully reimpregnated over and over again. And what are they being reimpregnated on? Rape racks. We didn't come up with the name, farmers did. So how is it even feasible or comprehensible that a woman, a feminist, is okay with taking products into her body that came off of a rape rack? And then put factory farming aside, just think about companion animals, right? What are companion animals dying in shelters for? Because of puppy mills and because of breeders. And what are breeders if they are not pimps? And what are they doing to animals if not prostituting them? I mean, my dog here, Hubble Yoda, right? He was overbred like all purebreds are, and he had his eyes removed 2 years ago. Okay, so for the women, for the feminists, we have to use the language that they're fighting against. We have pimps, we have prostitution, and we have rape racks. If that doesn't bring the feminist movement to us, I don't know what will. And then when we're done with the feminists, then go to the mothers. Most mothers become activists the minute that they gave birth or the minute they adopt a child from an orphanage because they love their babies. Well, all mothers, all species love their babies. So talk to mothers and talk to them about veal calves. Veal calves that are torn away from their mothers right after birth and put in a dark shed or crate where they can't stand up or turn around for the rest of their lives until finally somebody opens it up and drags them to slaughter, usually with their umbilical cords still trailing behind them. Talk to the mothers about that. You know, cows carry their babies for 9 months. And after they carry their babies for 9 months, then those babies are stolen from them, and ask any single undercover investigator and they will tell you there's nothing more relentless than a mother cow calling after her baby day in and day out. So once you've got the mothers on our side, go after the fathers, go after the men. Talk to them about the mutilations on factory farms. Talk to them about animals having their testicles ripped out of their scrotums without painkillers. Men, I am talking to you. That should have some reaction, because I have never said it to a man without having at least somebody go, oh, no, I can't hear about it. Well, if you're eating it, if you're drinking it, you should be brave enough to know about it. And then after you talk to them about that and you've gotten their attention, talk to them about the dehorning and the debeaking and the third-degree burns that are branded into animals. And then talk about the chicks. 40,000 baby chicks, you know, the really cute ones that you see in the commercials. Well, go online and look at what happens to them in the egg-producing business. Eggs are not okay. A lot of people still think that they are. They are not. They're responsible for these deaths, not to mention all the other horrors. But these baby chicks are being ground up alive. Go to Mercy for Animals, go to PETA, go to Farm Sanctuary, and look for yourself. It will haunt you for the rest of your life. Or they're being thrown into giant trash cans where they're being suffocated to death. So once you've got the fathers and once you've got the men on your side, then go after the animal lovers. Most animal lovers, not activists, I'm talking about just animal lovers that you find at the dog run, most of them will tell you that the relationship that you have with their animal is stronger than the relationship that they have with their friends or their spouse. If their dog was hit by a car and they didn't have the money to save that dog's life, most of them would be, at the pawn shop with their jewelry or refinancing their house or selling their car. But while they're doing that, chances are they have a hot dog or a turkey burger in their stomach. We have to reconnect them. So talk to them about pigs, for example. Pigs that in studies we already know are not only smarter than their dog, but smarter than a 3-year-old child. They also sing to their babies while they're nursing them. So talk to them about pigs and any other animal that you can. And then when you're done with that, please go to the foodies. What is going on with Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook with the food porn? It is its own business, and we do it too. Look at our amazing tofu lasagna. We do it too. So go to your friends that have their food porn of their disgusting, dripping with blood hamburgers and steaks. Invite them over to your house. Have a great food porn party. Get really good lighting and really good cameras. Have them over at a vegan potluck. But we can't stop there. We are not going to become a revolution just by having vegan potlucks in our living rooms. It's great, don't get me wrong, but get out of your neighborhoods. Go to the most affluent neighborhoods that you know of. Speak to the caterers. Speak to the people that are throwing fundraisers. It doesn't make any sense that people are throwing fundraisers to help people in need and then feeding them animals that are going to kill them. So speak to them and then go into the inner cities. Inner cities are in desperate need right now. Why? They are suffering from diabetes and obesity at a record high number. Why is that? Because of fast food restaurants, right? Fast food restaurants are easily accessible, and they are cheap, right? So go down there with your amazing vegan potluck and your pamphlets. Talk to people at the rec centers. Talk to people at the soup kitchens. Talk to people at churches. Get out of your neighborhood. We have to grow our numbers. And then finally, just appeal to people who want to be healthy, right? Let them know that heart disease and strokes and certain cancers and obesity and impotence can usually be avoided by having a plant diet. And then talk to them about living longer. Vegetarians and vegans live 6 to 10 years longer than the average meat eater. Who doesn't want to enjoy their old age, their retirement, see their grandkids grow? Use everything we've got. And then finally, finally you have to talk to the environmentalists. I will be honest. We have a clock over our heads here. If I start talking about environmentalists that tell me that they're trying to save the world and not being vegan, it makes me go nuts. It is like standing in front of somebody who says 2 and 2 equals 16. 2 and 2 equals 4. We have the proof. We have the data. We know that this is true. No, it kind of equals 16. No, it doesn't equal 16. So just so I don't get off on a tangent and talk for an hour just about environmentalists, let me just read it, okay? The United Nations has urged a global shift toward a vegan diet, saying that it is vital to save the world from hunger, fuel poverty, and the worst impacts of climate change. Factory farming animals and fishing causes global warming. I'm not going to get off topic here. Let me just say factory farming is the #1 cause of global warming. Okay, environmentalists, you should know that already. Soil erosion, water waste, water and air pollution, depletion of fossil fuels, waste of our Earth's precious energy, fecal contamination, the collapse of our ecosystems, the driving of marine life to extinction, the driving of plant life to extinction, the destruction of our rainforest, and world hunger. There is enough food in this world to feed every starving child. It will not happen until we all go vegan. 300,000 dolphins, porpoises, and whales are being killed in fishing nets every year. Our oceans are dying. If the oceans die, and at the rate that we are going, they will, there will be no humans. Without the ocean, we die. And I will say one more thing. The next world war is not what you think. It is not going to be over oil. It is going to be over water. And what are we doing with our precious water? We are contaminating the waterways with factory farming, and we are wasting our water. So please tell the environmentalists everything and keep on them. It doesn't even make sense that they're not vegan. Anyway, I want to wrap this up by having you get really high right now. I promise you, if you join our movement, you will have the most amazing victories to come. And you will be able to revel in the victories that we have had. You know, the victims that we represent, they don't vote. It makes it even harder. They don't have a voice. We are their voice. So when we hit gold and we get something going for them that is going to change their lives, we really, really celebrate. Here are just a couple, just a few. Bolivia has outlawed military training on animals. Almost every major airline no longer transports primates for medical research. Amazon has stopped selling whale and dolphin meat. PS 244 in Flushing, Queens is 100% vegetarian thanks to the New York Coalition for Healthy School Food. Imagine that. Imagine getting that start in life. West Hollywood, you cannot buy an animal, you cannot buy a fur coat, you cannot declaw your cat. If that is not progress, I do not know what is. Whole Foods bows down to consumer pressure. They no longer sell live lobsters. Foie gras, banned in California. Idaho, long-time holdout. Took a long time for them, but finally it's a felony offense to torture an animal there, including cockfighting. Tennessee becoming a leader in listing livestock under cruelty felony protection. All of these companies have finally promised to phase out cruel gestation crates in our lifetime, thanks mostly to Mercy for Animals and their undercover investigations. The European Parliament that we talked about earlier, right? They have voted to stop importing seal pup pelts from Canada. Tail docking, illegal in California. SeaWorld just got some new shareholders. Guess who they are? PETA. They're going to show up at every single meeting. And they're going to try to save and free the orcas from the inside out. That is what activists do. If we can't get in the front door, we get in the back door. If we can't get in the back door, we break the door down. The animals do not have the time for pleasantries. They do not have the time for people feeling bad if they're going to shake things up. Shake things up. You wouldn't be as quiet sitting around a dead body of a person at Thanksgiving and not want to say, hey, there's a dead body sitting here. Or if people were talking, you know, if they were being racist, if they were being prejudiced, if they were saying things about women, we wouldn't be shy talking about that, would we? Speak up for animals. They deserve it. They should have the same rights as people. And look who we have on our side. Everybody from President Clinton to Lisa Simpson, we cannot lose. And if you think that you are too small to make a difference, try sleeping with a mosquito. That is the words of the Dalai Lama. We have to keep that in mind. It doesn't matter if we're one person. If we're one person, we're saving thousands of animals by what we put on our fork. Okay, we can motivate, we can agitate, and we can win this war, but we can't be silent a minute longer. And why do we do it? We do it for him. We do it for everything that his eyes have seen and everything that his body has suffered for. He is the eyes of every animal in every factory farm. He is the eyes of every dolphin in Taiji. He is the eyes of every animal in a shelter that will never make it out alive because people keep shopping instead of adopting. He is the eyes of every animal in a laboratory that has known nothing of human touch except torture. He is the reason we are doing it and what he has seen. And so I leave you with this, the word spoken so many times by the Animal Liberation Front. The time for total animal liberation has come, and it is up to you and you and you and you and me until every single cage is empty. Because if not now, when? If not you, who? Thank you.